Right, I'll share screen. It did actually occur to me that I've got a slightly large monitor, so when I put it on share, do you guys want to let me know if it's like, the writing is too small and stuff, and I'll try and rearrange things a bit if that works.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Let's give this a go. How does it look?
Looks fine for me.
Fine for me as well.
Fine for me, but I also have a 27-inch, so.
Cool.
I'm on a laptop.
All right, shall I kick off?
Really tiny.
Yeah, I did worry about whether it's going to look a bit small. See if I can get the font size on the terminal windows a little bit larger at least. Just try and put this up.
Just Apple Plus will do it.
Command Shift Plus.
Yeah. All right, let's try that. Command Shift Plus. Oh, look at that. How's that? Is that a bit better? Can people see the writing, the terminal window a bit better?
That's great on 13 inches.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Should we go? Are we all set? Everyone ready?
Looks good.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's go. I'm going to chat about Ansible today. And yeah, I'll go a little bit into how I got into it, which was by accident. And then I'll try and do some demos. I was going to try and do demos of my blood oximeter at the end of it. So we'll see if we've got time for that. If not, then I could do it another day. And as always, stop me and ask questions if you want to. I'm not precious about it. And I'll try, we'll have to see. I haven't done a run through of the live demo. So it may be that some of the live demo goes a bit squirrely. You know how it is with these things. So first of all, how did I get into Ansible? I don't sell Ansible. I don't work for them. I've not done it for a job. It's just an amusing sideline that I got into. The main reason was I had a nice sticker on my laptop that someone gave me for free once. I had no idea what it was. Nice sort of A logo, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that is. I looked it up online, and turns out it was called Ansible. So I was like, oh, okay, I wonder what that is. Looked into it, thought, okay, I'm never going to use that. And then one day, about 3 or 4 months ago, I think, when I was in lockdown boredom, I looked around. I thought, well, there was, I was typing Ansible in about something or other else, and there was a book on offer. So I bought the book, and here it is, Ansible for DevOps. I'm not a DevOps. I'm a programmer, so so it's a little bit ridiculous, but also more seriously, I'd heard from other people that it is a good tool and good for doing sort of server configuration and things like that. I think I'd always thought I'm not going to do something like that because I've done Linux sysadmin for decades in one way or another. I know my way around Git inside and out. I know how to do secure shell onto a server and pull things up and stuff like that. So I just didn't see that it was going to be something that I wanted. Plus, also, it's like, you learn all this stuff for a tool, you learn this whole new language for a tool, and then you find out it doesn't do all the things you want to do. So you still find yourself secure shelling into your server, and your tool only does half of it. And then your tool says, you don't have the right version of Ruby. And you think, oh, I wish I'd never got involved in this. I've had some terrible time with Fastlane and Jenkins and all of these other things. So it didn't seem like it was for me. That said, keep an open mind on these things. And one day I was just utterly fed up with updating my website. So when I want to update my website, I have it all stored in my Git repository. I update the HTML code normally to say some new version of SwiftRider, available. Commit that to Git, secure shell onto the server, change directory to the relevant directory, do a git pull, go and check it with the web browser, not a horrendous amount of work, but then, you know, it's just a bit boring. And I thought, oh, I can script this, you know, I should be able to do a shell script or something like that. And then also when I want to deploy a new version of my application that I sell, then I'm doing that every sort of month or two. I've got to SCP the file up. It's quite a big file because it's a DMG file for a Mac app. And then I've got to do the whole rigmarole again, and I've got to tie it all together. And I just thought, well, maybe I'll see if this is something that would help me with that. And I'm so glad I did, because it really is nice. I'm really pleased with it, which is why I thought I'd chat a bit about it. And, you know, you guys can maybe enjoy the conversation, and maybe one day you can give it a try yourself. But anyway, we'll go over it, and I'll sort of describe some of the things about it. But I think the thing that I'm trying to get to is that I'm not one of these people that always has to use the latest tool.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, that's my Siri. I'm not the person that needs to use the latest tools or anything like that. And I'm not afraid of secure shell or Linux sysadmin. So I'm not using something like this to hide behind. And I think when I started to read about Ansible, you know, kind of curled up on the sofa, bored like everyone else, locked down in my house, the thing that appealed to me is that it's just written in Python. It underneath the hood, it basically SSHs onto your server and just handles the commands for you. And most importantly of all, you can take a shell script and you can just pretty much turn it into an Ansible playbook straight away, because Ansible is set up to do SSH commands and to do shell commands on the remote server. So you don't, if you're really attached to being Linux sysadmin and you don't want to go down the modules route and the idempotence, which I'm going to go into in a minute, which I strongly recommend, then you can really just use it for sort of almost like a shell scripting tool. And then you can gradually, a little bit at a time, convert yourself over to the new ways of doing things. So, and I think that's what really appealed to me, because I've got 25 years of experience of Linux, and I don't want to give that all up straight away. You know, I'm too attached to it, really. So, so that's sort of the background and how I got into it. I thought I'd write something about what it is. Again, I'm really a beginner in Ansible, so take what I say with a pinch of salt. But my view on it is, it's like a sort of a Swiss Army knife. So it's like a set of tools and a set of scripts and programs, quite a lot. You'll see in a minute. I'll go into the page and you'll get a feel for how many of these sort of modules there are. And as I said, it works, it's written in Python and it works over SSH SCP. And the key thing that you've got is like all of the standard stuff that you would want to do. Like, I want to go onto my server. So everything you always start, your first thought is I need to SSH onto my server. And then you say, okay, right now I need to copy some files onto my server. And then you say, oh, I need to update this directory within my server with the latest files from the my Git repository with this branch and this commit and so on and so forth. Or I want to install a package on my server. You know, I need a new package on there. All of those, there's a module for that. And the key idea is idempotence. So it goes and looks and says, do I need to do this thing? Has it been done already? If not, don't do anything and report back that it's already there. If it hasn't been done, then do it. And it means that you can just run these commands without thinking about it. And I'll show you that in a second. And I think it just takes away a lot of the effort. Then naturally leads on to Playbooks, which is almost like the scripting language of Ansible. So it's sort of like you put a list of commands in, and that's the thing that's written in YAML. I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so I think enough theory on that. Let's go into, I'll try and do some demos. So what I'm going to do here, I've got the command line here where I'm going to put the Ansible commands. And then over here, I've done an SSH onto my server. Now, let me just check that I have actually got a connection. Yes, you can see the sort of slowness that you get. Oh, okay, so I've got the Ansible demo directory on there. So let's remove that. I didn't actually clean up before I started the demo. Classic. Okay, you can see that this is genuine. So this is the sort of stuff you always do, right? We're all familiar with, well, you know, anyone who's done administration on a remote server or on a Raspberry Pi, which is what I'll get to in a minute, has done all of these sorts of things. There we go. Right now, if I do it'll say not found. Right, that's fine. On this side, I'm going to do the first simple command. So say I want to run a command on a remote server. This is what it looks like. So you're always using a module, whether you realize it or not, but there's a default module, which is basically scripting and commands. So I'm going to be looking, you're going to see me looking in this direction because I've got the screen over here, which is what you guys are seeing. So if you're looking at my image, then you'll see me looking to one side. So the first, I'm going to sort of take you through the various parts of this. This is very straightforward thing at this point. I think you can imagine what it's going to do. Ansible's our standard command to run it. Web server is the machine that we're going to, and this can be a machine, one machine or a set of machines. So you could basically say, and I'm going to show you in a second how you configure that. You could say, I want to do this on all of my Raspberry Pis, and you've got 5 Raspberry Pis in your house. I'm going to create a directory on all of them. That would be a bit of a weird use case, but you could potentially do it. If I do this now, okay, let's just check this is running. Don't know why everything's running so slowly. I guess it's the curse of the demo. Oi, oi, oi. And this, okay, sorry about the pink error message. Couldn't get rid of that before when I was preparing the demo. This is the actual stuff that shows you what's going on. So as we'll see a little bit later on, when you're using modules, this will either say changed or success. Change means it's done something, there was something to do. Success actually, ironically, means there was nothing to do. So a little bit counterintuitive, but that's how it works. And the colors show you immediately what's going on. And if you've got 9 servers, then you'll see maybe one of them changes and the other ones don't. And if I look on the server now, you'll see that there's a directory. Not very interesting because there's nothing in that directory. And you could imagine that I could do the same thing again, like I could do add a file on there, those sorts of things. But then you're sort of not using a lot of the power of Ansible, not getting a lot of the fun stuff. One thing that I just quickly want to show you from the very simple version of commands is if I run this again, then you're trying to make a tree that already exists. So you'd expect an error, and that's exactly what you'll get in a second when the thing is just so slow. I really don't know why it's so slow. There we go. Cannot create directory, file exists already. And this is because all you're doing is running a script. You're not using any of the power of modules. Now, if on this side, I remove the directory again, prove on there, and now I'll show you using a module, which is really what Ansible is all about. So this is doing exactly the same sort of thing. You're basically saying, I'm going to use the file module here. So -m is my module switch. What module am I going to use? -a is the attributes or the parameters you're passing. And you'll see why the syntax looks a little bit strange in a minute. It looks much more sensible in YAML. It takes 2 parameters, path and state. Path, Ansible Demo, state directory, as in create a directory called Ansible Demo. When I run that, you'll see it produces exactly the same result when it finally gets back. One thing I'm also going to do, okay, so that's a little bit more stuff going on. You're talking about some facts, change true, and it's showing you various other things because it knows what you were doing. It wasn't just executing a piece of script. So it's giving you back some information about what happened. But on this side, it's just done what we did before. Now, the fun thing is if I do this again, we're not going to get an error because it already knows that the directory exists, goes and checks whether it exists, and says, there you go, success, it was already there, the directory is already there. If I want to remove it, you get this kind of funny looking command. So basically you're saying almost exactly the same thing, same path, but you're saying state absent. I think this is pointing to something about the way Ansible thinks, which is it's declarative more than scripted. So you say what you want the situation to be, and it goes away and says, do I need to do anything? Yes or no? If so, do it. And that's why you can do it on a whole bunch of servers, because you're saying, for all of these servers, this is the final state that I want this to be in. I want a path called Ansible Demo to be a directory to exist somewhere on the server, and then it decides whether or not to do anything. So if I do state absent, you're basically saying, it's quite different from the way that you would normally do something where you say remove a directory. You're saying path Ansible demo state absent. You're saying I don't want this directory to exist, and under the hood it will actually do something because it'll remove the directory. You can see the directory is not there, and if I run it again, it's idempotent. So it'll just silently say that's fine, the directory isn't there, and I don't need to worry about it. Now this gets a little bit more fun. Okay, one side note that I forgot to say about, there is a file which I'm going to show, but I'm not going to show the contents for security reasons, in Ansible, the Ansible directory called hosts. So this file contains all of the host names and web server addresses. I've got a redacted version of it here. So it might look something like this. This is how you configure all of your servers. So you'd say something like, for my Raspberry Pis here in the house, I've got one Raspberry Pi currently. I'm going to plug in a couple when we've got the garage conversion done. And it's called Pi4 local. And if I say run a command on Pi, then it will run it on all of the machines that are under here. So it'll change all of those machines to the state that I've asked for. This is my web server. Changed it to a fake IP address for security reasons. When I say set up the web server, update to this particular version of Git. And that's why you always say in your parameters what state you want to do it. You don't say pull out the latest version of Git. You say update the Git directory in this folder to be this particular version, because you're always saying what you want the final state to be. I've got a couple of variables in here that just help it along, like what user am I going to use on the Raspberry Pis, and where's the SSH key for it. So that was just a quick side note on it. But if we look at a slightly more interesting example, say I want to copy up a file to the server. If I do something like this, so I'm saying on the web server, and this is all going to my virtual web server, which is being run in America. So this is being transmitted across the States. I'm using the copy module. These are the parameters I want. The destination of the file is Ansible Demo /MrMeeseeks.txt. Source is MrMeeseeks.txt, which says, I'm Mr. Meeseeks, look at me, what can I do for you? If I say, run this module now, oh, actually, I think I might have just stomped on it because I've deleted the directory it's going to go into. So this might come out with an error message, we'll see. If you were doing this in a playbook, then the line before this would be creating the directory, and this line, yeah, so create the directory and then run it. And you can actually, in a playbook, you can kind of make these things depend on each other. Right, so that says it's changed because it's created the directory. Now I can run the copy file. This is copying a file from your local machine onto the remote machine, or if you were copying it to several machines. So if this corresponded to 5 machines, then it would copy the same file to all 5 of them, and it would only copy it if the file didn't exist on the other end. And again, if we run this again, sorry, do a listing on the other end, and if I type out the file, and you'll see if I run the same command again, then it says success, but it's basically done nothing. If I change the file contents and then run it again, then it will detect the fact that I've changed the file and it's different from the one on the server, and it will update it again. And I think after that, we've got, maybe I'll do one other quick demonstration of that, and then I'll get into some of my playbooks. Okay, changed it on the other end. If I type the file out, and I mean, this is a little bit of a dry demonstration of all the powers of it, but you can, if you sit and think about it, you can see that this is actually quite handy when you're doing a whole load of these commands at once, because you don't have to sit and think what state things are in. You don't have to SSH on and look at stuff. You just essentially say, okay, this server, I want all of these things to be there. And you'll see an example of that when I'm setting up the print server and a little bit later, sort of at the end of this talk. So you can see that you've got a fair amount of power. And I think another one of the things that's really nice about it is that you don't need to worry so much about the syntax of what you're doing at the far end. So if, for example, I want to say, let's create a user. So I want to use the user module. I'm also using this -b switch here, which basically means become, which is sudo. So switch users to root while you're doing it. Create a user called Mr. Meeseeks. Here's the password hash. Look at me as the password. And now on another window here, I can SSH on. So there's a massive security breach, but I'll delete the user in a second. Whoops. Okay, we'll call out the curse of the demo. Something had to go wrong. This worked when I was testing it earlier. So basically it creates a user with the password you say. When I want to get rid of that user, again, I just say Meeseeks states absent, and it gets rid of the user on the other end. I don't want to type out my etc. password file on the server for obvious reasons. So I was trying to do an SSH through to show it. I don't know why that didn't work. One of those things. Okay, I think that's enough demonstration about how Ansible works and how it thinks and what its sort of logic is. We'll go into some of the playbooks that I've done now and show you how they made my life easier. So a playbook is using this YAML notation, which I'll go over in a second, but it's essentially a scripted list or a sort of a hierarchical structure of all of the Ansible modules that you want to call with all of their parameters. And so you do it just one after the other. And it can be quite simple or it can be quite complicated, but all of them are done essentially idempotent. You can have, so it's almost a little bit more like a make file, like when you're building something using C compilers and make files. You're essentially saying these are the sorts of, this is the situation where I want it to be ending up in, go and figure out what you want to do. So in order to update my web server, should I go over the YAML syntax first? Okay, YAML, yet another markup language. It's like a simpler, more human readable version of JSON. How it works is based on indentation. The hyphens indicate elements in an array, and indentation shows the hierarchy within it. So in this example, we always start with the host you want to run the playbook on. Become means, do I need to SU? No, I don't need to because I'm just copying some files over there. And then tasks is the meat of it. This is where you get each of the Ansible things that you're going to do. This is just a human readable name. These are all properties within it. And then you're using the Git module, and these are the parameters you're passing to it. What repository do you want to access? Behind the scenes, it's using SSH, do all that sort of work. Do I want to clone? In this case, I'm saying no, because I don't want to do a clone if it doesn't already exist, because that would be an error because I'm overwriting the existing version. And where do you want to drop it to? And then it just goes onto the server and does all of that itself. That's what I need to do to update my server. So I want to do a server update. I do Ansible, Playbook, and you'll see that I've got this is actually a redacted version because the update website YAML has got some things in there that I shouldn't really have broadcast across the internet. And I'll just do that. That'll update my website. So this is an example of a playbook running. It always gathers facts unless you tell it not to, which is where it goes to the server and checks, you know, it's got enough CPU and those sorts of things. Ooh, I wish this wasn't so slow. I'm sorry about that. Update from Git repo. Done. And if you had multiple servers, if I was deploying this to 5 different servers that were load balanced, then it would just do them one at a time and say what the status was with each one of those. But there you go, that's updating my website just with one command. I don't need to remember anything else anymore. This is a slightly more complicated version, but the same sort of thing. You're copying up the new version of my software and then updating the website to say there's a new version of the software available. And these are the 2 tasks in the tasks array. It may look a bit esoteric at first, but you really get used to it really quickly. And it's just so much easier because I can just run that command and it'll basically just copy up update website with app, it's called, and it'll copy up the latest version of the app and update the website at the same time to say the latest version of the app is available. So that's really good. Finally, we will get into the most interesting one, hopefully, which is how did I provision a brand new Raspberry Pi 4 to be a internet printing web server without having to do any extra things. Oh, I'll do that last. We'll get into that page last. So here's the playbook that I put together with a little bit of trial and error. I can't demo it because it's going to be too slow, and I don't have a blank Raspberry Pi that I can upload to anyway, but I think use your imagination on that one. This playbook works against, certainly against Raspbian, but should work against other Linux distributions, because that's one of the key things about Ansible. Figures out which Linux distro you're on and adjusts it accordingly. And also can do so for Mac OS if you're connecting to a Mac OS server. Not many people do that, but you know, it is possible to do. So if I go briefly over what this is doing. So the first thing it's doing is installing on a blank vanilla Raspberry Pi 4, the CUPS server, which is the printing server, Linux printing server. Avahi Discover, this makes the print server available to Macs so that you can see it in your print panel, basically. HPLIP, this is Hewlett-Packard's driver package. Without that, the things just don't behave properly. Hewlett-Packard seems to be doing quite good driver support. This is well worth installing if you ever installing CUPS and you ever want to run a Hewlett-Packard DeskJet, home DeskJet. And finally, Sane, which is the scanner package. So all I need to do is I say for all of these packages that are in this array, state present. This will actually go and check whether each of these are installed on the Raspberry Pi and install them for you. Do all of the update repositories, all of the things you would normally have to do with, you know, apt-get or whichever version of package tool you're using for the distribution you're doing. I just do all that for you. It's just, you know, that's done. So fantastic. Then I've got in my CUPSD, I've got some modified CUPSD. So I've got a local version of the CUPSD configuration file with just a couple of bits changed. This copies that up and puts it into etc. CUPSD. All of this, of course, needs to be privileged. So we've got become yes at the top here. Same D to get the scanner working, and another one for, I can't remember what this is. This is one of the files that gets Sane working. I need to add the Raspberry Pi user to the LP admin group in my etc. groups file. Again, another task just done like that. Sane needs to be added to the LP group, done. This says, make sure that CUPS is accessible anywhere on your local network. Restart the CUPS server after you've done all of this configuration. When you get into more advanced stuff, you can say only do this if you've changed some of the above things, but this is perfectly fine for now. Make Sane discover the local scanners. This outputs the same information down the bottom. And finally, make sure that the Sane daemon is running so that you've got the scanner daemon running. And basically, after a bit of trial and error, I got this working, and you can just take a blank Raspberry Pi 4, run this playbook on it by just saying Ansible Playbook Pi 4. Obviously, you have to set up your secure shell keys and stuff like that. And it'll just go away and do all of it within 15 minutes or so. And you've got a print server. And I think we should be able to access it. Civil drop 192 and 6 1. Go for it.
Earlier, you
Okay.
had a module parameter that
Yeah.
that basically supplied the how-to part of that, and I don't see any modules indicated in your playbook.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, good question. That's so this is where the command line parameters look quite different from the tasks within the playbook, but they are exactly equivalent. So this is the module name right here, user. That's the copy module. So we saw that back here. I was using the copy module. That's the user module. This is the package module, which would be slow running but work. Shell runs regular shells. This is service. So this will do things like start and stop services, and it will figure out whether you're running systemd or whether you're using old init scripts and do all of the appropriate commands accordingly. So that's it. And these are the parameters that go in the -a section afterwards. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. That's great.
Hi, Carl. It's Nick. Just wondering, so this, I nearly used the scripting word there. So this Ansible document you've got here, is it platform agnostic? So if you were rolling out a CUP server on a, say, Ubuntu server,
yeah,
you would just run the same script, but it would back end.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. I know, which is, I mean, for me, that's a big win. It's just mainly not remembering stuff. And I mean, as I say, take all this with a pinch of salt because I am new to it. And it could be that, you know, when you get into it, you're like, oh yeah, it doesn't work on these circumstances. But I think pretty much that's how it's supposed to work. You just like it'll work on SUSE Linux, Red Hat, CentOS, Ubuntu, Mint, Mac OS as well, which is quite something for it. That'll actually, I mean, gosh, I'd be surprised if that works flawlessly because Mac is quite different. It's not even Linux Mac, it's BSD it's based on. But yeah, I thought I'd quickly show this page as well. This is where, so this is the Ansible documentation, and this is where I was looking this afternoon in order to get to polish the talk up and get some of the example commands working. This shows you how each of the modules works. That's the file module, what all the parameters are. And you can see that there's lots of different things that you can use if you really want. All the different edge cases. Some of them will only be important in Mac OS, for example. That's the user module. So that shows you all the different things you could do. Like, do you want it to automatically generate an SSH key? Do you want to make sure that you put a comment in? You can make sure that they need to create a password when they first log in. Hidden is Mac OS only, so that it doesn't appear in the list of pickers when you log in on a Mac screen. Copy, this is the file copy command, which has got, you know, basically the source and destination, but lots of other things as well. And interestingly, the file command is used to create files or directories. So, you know, slightly different from the copy command. And this page just made me laugh. So this is when I tried to look in Ansible and see how many modules there are. So it's quite, I don't know if it's coming down the screen quite well. I mean, look at all this FortiGate stuff. Like, you know, I haven't worked for FortiGate. Haven't worked with a FortiGate router for 20 years, but you know, there's basically lots of stuff. And then in the middle of it, you'll have like the ordinary modules that you'd work with regularly. So that's, I think that's pretty much it for the demo. I don't think there's a great deal more I want to say, apart from if you don't know who Mr. Meeseeks is, look it up. It's very funny.
So it's another question. Just seeing your link to the firewalls. So, for example, if I was rolling out a new web server, would you be able to set up the commands to configure the firewall as well as the server?
You mean like IP tables and things like that?
Yes.
Don't know. Do you know what? I'll look. My guess would be probably yes. This tool looks dangerously powerful. That would be my only thing that I'd say. You know, there was one part of me that said, yeah, IP tables, there you go. I knew there would be. There was one part of me that thought, if you made a mistake on this and it was hitting 50 servers production service. Yeah, that'd be fun, wouldn't it? I mean, in the book that I'm reading, they're talking towards the end of it about your scripts should have test-driven development, and you should have test servers that you test them on and so on. I'm thinking, yeah, definitely.
No, thanks.
I have several questions, Carl. Oh, sorry.
Sure.
Are you already finished, Nick?
Thank you.
So in the beginning, you ran a copy script, and you said that it didn't do anything if it didn't change. How does it detect if you change the script? Does it use a hash of the script or the date and time?
Don't know. Would probably look in here to see what it says. So I've just experienced that it doesn't do it. My guess would be it does date and time. That's what I would guess. Let's see, does it say on there? I bet you there's a parameter in here that says how to do it. So generally with Ansible, the thing that I found is there's defaults in there for default behaviors to do with how it detects whether something's changed or not. And those defaults are normally pretty good, but you can tweak it. So you can say, should I run this or not? And you can basically say for one of the modules, always run it. You know, so you essentially override the idempotent. You can do that if you want to. Yeah. But it seems a shame unless it's necessary.
Especially for bigger files like a database or so, you don't want to copy the database if it didn't change. Let's see. Will you supply this very practical Raspberry Pi cup script somewhere?
Sure, yeah.
GitHub or whatever. I made a screenshot, but then it's like I have to type everything. I'm a very lazy bastard.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly
use case that I have. Cool.
There's a thing called Ansible Galaxy, which is a repository of scripts. I haven't looked into it yet, but I can try and upload it there.
Okay.
So yeah, and obviously I can put it on the Facebook page, but not everyone's on Facebook. So
I'm not on Facebook. People dump Facebook.
Yeah, I can email it to you because obviously I know you very well. So
yeah. Yeah, we have other means of communicating. And my last question. Sorry to hog the question thing. I see in the script there's a shell command or a shell module and a command module.
Yeah.
And the shell is like you give a command to the shell, and in the command you just give a command. So it's like to me there's no difference between cups control remote any or saying find scanner. So what?
Oh, what's it? Yeah, no, good point. And he does go over that in the book.
Okay.
It's more. It's sort of obvious in Linux sysadmin ways, I suppose, or it's obvious to me. Command is something you're running. So you're running a program, like you're running, it goes and finds a binary and executes that binary. Shell is you take the string that is the shell script and you pass it to an instance of the shell, say bash on the other end. That string that you pass may only contain the name of a binary, and the shell would go and run it. I know the difference may seem like splitting hairs, but generally you're going to want to use command if you can for security reasons. So in general, it's ideal if you can avoid shells that allow a vector for injection. So, you know, say you put a password in there. If you're passing that to a binary that takes passwords and someone injects, you know, 50,000 bytes of complicated, you know, SQL injection attack or, you know, some sort of injection attack, then it'll probably just balk. If you're passing it to a shell, then they might actually be able to escape out. They could be running as root and they could do all kinds of nasty stuff. So that's why it's better to use command if you can, and use shell only if you actually need some input from the shell. I think in this particular case, probably I could have used command. Long and the short of it. So yeah. But you know, if you're using pipes or you know, you're using all the sort of stuff, or you're using an if statement or something like that, that's actually built into the shell, then you would use shell.
Can I
I have a question if no one else does. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Brennan.
Hi, Carl. Great talk, thank you. Just a couple of questions. What's your normal workflow now? Do you kind of create something, do the shell scripts, SSH, and then convert it into Ansible? or do you kind of start working straight to Ansible and then figure out there?
Good question, I guess. I found myself, I don't know if I can say what my normal workflow is because I've just started doing this literally in lockdown. So I don't feel like I've got enough of it, but how I'm leaning towards is creating Ansible first, because, and then if I feel like I can't work it, then maybe go and create a shell script. I'm very comfortable with shell scripts and all of their weird idiosyncrasies and all of the, you know, how test works and what all those square brackets mean and so on. But let's face it, it's not that easy. And I'd rather use my brain power for something else. So if Ansible's got a module that's going to do it, then I'd probably just write it as an Ansible script. I've got quite a few of them in my Ansible directory, and I've only started whenever lockdown started, end of April, beginning of May, I started doing this. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Sort of set a question. So if you're working on a big site, for example, say you have thousands of devices, does Ansible provide support for auditing? So you can go back like 3 months and see what you've actually done because something went wrong.
Very good question. I would bet it does, and my understanding is yes. But yeah, you'd certainly want to make sure. Yes, you definitely want to make sure. I mean, I think you want to source control this stuff. You'd want to, if you were in a bigger place with real live servers, you'd want to test it on some demo servers.
I'm
TDD.
working with, this is getting integrated into Jenkins, and the output gets saved down to your release ticket. So it's auditors come in, they can see the full tracing intent.
Yeah,
Yeah,
makes perfect sense.
The other question I had was, we were looking at using this for work at one point, and someone pointed out there are GUIs available, but I guess I wasn't sure if those make any sense at all, or whether it's just more stuff to sell you sort of thing. But I guess
I don't know, really. I'm so prejudiced against GUIs in my life generally that, you know, I'm probably not the right person to ask. I don't know. I do use GUIs, but I know. I mean, I spent most of my career writing them actually. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I could see that. I could see a use case for that. GUI is always good for browsing and sorting information, really. I think authoring is great with text and command lines. I think GUIs are fantastic for getting an overview of things.
Richard,
Yep.
so we use the Ansible Tower, I think it's called, which is like an orchestration that fits on top of Ansible. The idea is that you can actually modularize these different components and then reuse it for different things. We use it at work already for that purpose.
Yeah, some people use, as I say, some people use Jenkins, but they also use Ansible roles as opposed to these playbooks that are kind of more, sit more on their own. So I think the roles you can start, that's what I'm starting to muck around with now. You kind of share it between different kind of themes of activity.
So I guess if you're just mucking around at home, then Ansible by itself would be plenty. If you're talking teams of people of varying skills and stuff like that, and you want to be able to have consistency across your teams, then you may want a GUI or some extra tools to help. Is that a good summary?
The thing that I haven't really got my head around what the advantage of roles are over specific playbooks. So I'm starting to muck around with roles now, but I'm not quite seeing the benefit yet.
Right.
I think, Richard, it's a numbers game. So the more you use it, then the better off you are, and then the more you start using it, you want visibility of what the hell is going on. Right? And I think that's where the likes of Ansible Tower comes into play, where you can see, you know, where an orchestration has failed, because you're making these playbooks repeatable and reusable as much as you can, right? So if you're building, for example, a web server, I'm making these things up now, right? If you're building a web server, you might have more than one reason to have a web server. One could be used for example, a firewall setup. One could be used for example, SharePoint. There could be different things. And then depending on your server build requirements, you can then layer on top of each other the different build components. That's certainly how we use that work.
Yeah, I certainly like the idea of pressing a button and getting my pies rebuilt. When you have to like upgrade to the latest version, and you can't just do an update. You're upgrading the whole distribution. Or you want to start from scratch for whatever reason. It's always a pain to go through and run through the various things that you always do for every bloody pie.
Yeah,
I think security aside, I haven't quite figured out how to automate that. But yeah, I mean, I would sort of work on that at some point. But yeah, it certainly seems like, because Pi's got an SD card in it, so you can have an image that you throw on there that's a blank, and then work up from that.
Actually, Richard, could I show you the playbooks I've got just very quickly? I know the one person's cancelled, but just 2 minutes. I can just show everybody what. Very much work in progress.
I've stopped sharing so we can do more.
Okay, let me see if this works. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
So that's my hosts file. So I've got a kind of all Linux, which is everything. Then I've got my 2 magic mirrors, then an Apache server, and then I've got a couple of other groupings that I'm starting to set up. Then I have a Python role. So this is just basically, you run that almost like you run a playbook, but the role is then Python. And the Python libraries in are, the Adafruit, et cetera. And then another one I have is a Monitrix role. So the idea is that you start sharing sort of more object-oriented approach. Again, I'm also in the early stages of this, so I'm still figuring it out. But for instance, the Monitrix, so this is not actually a playbook. This is called a role. So you don't have tasks listed here. Now, apparently this is meant to be kind of the what the bigger companies start using is they move on to the roles where you define roles. So over here, I could do a whole lot of package installs, copy a file that was covered earlier by Carl, and then install the Debian package, and then do an update. The reason I've got owner and group here is because I'm actually doing this from an Orange Pi, although I'm thinking of moving it back to a Raspberry Pi. And then Magic Mirror, for instance, is a little bit.
It's good you're sharing that file actually, because you're covering a lot of things I missed.
Right. So over here, I've got obviously app install. It does a various installs. It does a shell, does a curl to download the latest node, and then actually compiles a node. Then it does a git repo, pulls down various bits and bobs. So you can see here I do a copy as well. So the config file. So I'm going to have a central repository for all the config files, which sits on NFS, which will sit in my loft with everything else. Stores PM2, another file copy, and then does all the gits. As you know, Magic Mirror works on all these kind of components, and then does an install again at the end. So, somebody mentioned earlier around rebuilding a Pi from scratch. So I've kind of got it working where what used to take me an hour now takes me 5-10 minutes while I go get a coffee. But the only thing I need to do, of course, I need to burn the image, and I need to enable SSH, and I need to push out the public-private key so that I don't need to enter a password when you SSH from the Ansible master node. But other than that, it's got, I used to burn SD cards, images in, so I could go back to that, but I'm trying to get to a point where if there's any issue, I just run Ansible, all these roles of the type of server that I'm setting up, and it'll get back to me, get me back to exactly where I wanted within all the latest software, etc., latest builds. It works pretty well.
Oh, that's cool actually, because I'd read about roles and I couldn't quite get my head around them, but that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I'm
so
still
basically, in a way, what
it.
I would want to do is have a print server role and say, put all of that stuff that I've got in the playbook, just say print server role, and then say, okay, make Raspberry Pi 4 a print server.
I've converted my Ansible playbooks like what you've got to try and make it role-based. So you have these kind of a role.yaml, but then you could have a role here for all Linux. You could have a role, and then you could have different roles that that are shared by all Linux. So you could do your, your apt update, your if there's other if you wanted to do like for instance, my Monitrix is actually kind of a standard build, and Python should actually be a standard build as well. So I could have roll Python and then Monitrix. Well, some of you will be aware of Monitrix for monitoring your Raspberry Pi or CPU temperature, memory usage, all that kind of thing. So no, that's what I'm trying to get to. But again, it's going to be, the aim is that you say rebuild this IP address, because you can specify your IP address, of course. So when you run it, that's the kind of command you run, and it will then go off and do everything that needs to be done for that IP address, and it will know that that IP address .1.155 is on your hosts file. It needs to have it's in the all Linux group, and it's in Magic Mirror, and it's after 10 minutes it will have reconstructed that Raspberry Pi to the point that you wanted.
So it doesn't get confused. It doesn't linear in serial order, does it? I'll do all your Linux blocks again.
Well, what I have done is my builds, I'm doing it, I'm specifying the IP address each time, but if you don't specify IP address, it goes and does it from the top down, it does everything. Then you're going to have to, that would be doing it while you're having dinner, for instance, would take a bit longer, but generally you wouldn't, because you effectively kind of
it does have a degree of parallelism, though. It should be able to run, if you've got 10 machines, then it should be able to run them separately, because each one runs it's just SSHing through and running commands on the far end, right? So it's not.
I do remember a while ago there is a flag that you can.
My understanding is multi-threaded. So.
Yes, you can actually set a flag to go 1 by 1 or 2 by 2, and you can actually set up how much parallelization it's allowed. Yeah, but yeah, I've been having a fair amount.
And I think the thing that I read was that you've got to assume that this is in parallel, and you can't assume the order that's going to go in. So if you've got 10 servers in your group and you run this command on 10 servers, then it can do them in any order, and they'll be running in, because they're all separate machines. Like, they're doing the actual work themselves. The master is just orchestrating it. Say, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, and so on like that. Yep. That's my understanding of it. But
must be some Ansible war stories out there with things going wrong.
But I've only got wrong Raspberry Pi at the moment, so.
If somebody's starting into Ansible for the first time, I would highly recommend people check out the Pulumi code. It's also open source, and it supports various language modules, Python, C# or whatever, and you can type in any language. You can also use YAML or whatsoever. So if you like Ansible, I think you'll love Pulumi as well. Worth a try. But it's quite new. I mean, not really new, but it doesn't have, I don't think it has a book like the one you have for Ansible, for DevOps and stuff. Highly recommend looking at Pulumi as well.
Sorry, stupid question. How do you spell Pulumi?
P-U-L-U-M-I.
Oh, thanks.
If you look up on the chat window, it's in there.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much, Carl. That was really good. Thanks, Brian. It's really really interesting topic, actually.
Thank you.
That one.
Cool. All right.
So our last presenter can't make it. He's got car troubles. It's up on the lift. He's probably right now just hearing how much money it's going to cost him, so he can't make it. Does anyone have any questions or anything they want to present?
Oh, I forgot to demonstrate my little thingy. I can show you that quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
Don't know if I can actually demonstrate it properly, but yeah, I'll go over it quickly. So I was going to describe it. The breadboard here is just connecting. This is a knockoff Arduino Uno. So this is done by a company called Orange Pip, who are based in the UK. And it's just, you can see it's exactly like a standard Arduino, and if we made it exactly like one. And that's connecting up to this server. So I got this server from, gosh, I'm going to say, I think I got it from Pimaroni. Can't remember, to be honest, because it was months ago and I was feeling fairly sick at the time. So what it is, ignore the yellow band briefly, but if I pull back the yellow band so you can actually see, that's one of my daughter's hair bands that I've procured. So it's a little sensor there. And this sensor just consists of a red, green, and infrared LED and a photometer. And all it does is essentially turns each one on, one after the other, and detects how much light is coming back. This sensor can be used for various things like detecting smoke and stuff like that, because it looks at the ratio of the light that's coming back in each frequency, and then you try and deduce something from it. So there's no real calculation going on the sensor. The sensor is a very simple, cheap, dumb piece of kit, and it's got an I to C interface at the bottom, so it's got usual SDA, SCL. Sends it through to your Raspberry Pi, your Arduino, and that does the interpretation and the work. And one of the use cases they've got is blood gas detection. So I was fairly sick a couple of months ago with what my doctor suspected was COVID-19, but we don't know because I got a negative test, so who knows, whatever. But one of the things that I looked up when I was in the depths of my illness is your blood oxygen level goes down when you have viral pneumonia because your lungs don't work as well. And that's something that's really worth monitoring, because that's how you can tell if you're really sick, and you should be calling 999 basically. So I had like a finger blood monitor that I got from Amazon, and I was checking myself regularly, and it was kind of, you know, within the right brackets and all that sort of stuff. And I was telling the NHS when they were telling me what to do, but I was kind of curious as to what happened at night, because I know that your blood gases can go down at night. So I thought I'll buy this and I'll log my blood oxygen overnight, and, you know, I'll check that it's okay, and I can give that information to the doctor, and, you know, all of those good things. Of course, it took me so long to buy the kit, put it together, and so on and so forth, especially when I was sick, that by the time I got something even vaguely working, I was well again, and I didn't care. But, you know, this is the nature of such projects. I'll do a very quick demo. So all this is, as I said, is plugging in power and SD and SCL lines into the usual spots over here. If I put this thing online, this may or may not work. Plug it in. Pull up Arduino. Okay, and let me just check. I don't usually use Arduino, so I have to double check what I'm doing, because obviously I use my own tool most of the time. But this code is written for Arduino currently. Let's upload that. Open up the serial monitor. What just happened there? I just realized I didn't press the share button. Okay, here we go. So this is Arduino. We'll upload that. You guys, I'm assuming, are familiar with the Arduino IDE. And let's try starting the serial monitor. Oh, why is this not working? No, where is it? Okay, it's gone to another window, that's why. Right, so it gives you this message, says attach the sensor with a rubber band, because if you move it around even slightly, then it starts to misconvert. And if I press, okay, now you're seeing the readings that are coming back are the values from the infrared sensor and the red sensor. And actually, there isn't an infrared sensor and a red sensor. There's basically just a red LED and an infrared LED, and it turns one, just does a PWM, turns them on and off, and then reads the values coming back from the photo sensor, and it just determines if I had the red LED on, then it was red light. If I had the infrared LED on, then it was infrared light. It doesn't turn on the green for this particular use case. You can see that it's reading my SpO2 level is about 96, 97. When I was sick, this was about 92, 93. My heart rate is not 187. I'm not that scared. I think the code is slightly faulty, and I want to contact them. But yeah, basically that's it really. I think that's all I can demonstrate on that.
Hold your breath.
Well, Questions on that?
Carl, you mentioned that it was a red and an infrared LED.
Yeah.
But I also see green in your code. So it is a
There is,
multi-color.
yeah, the sensor has all three.
Ah, okay. Because all the
but they,
Fitbits and Apple Watches and whatever, they all use green LEDs to measure.
Yeah, they do.
The
Yeah,
heart rate.
they use green. I mean, it's possible. So I guess there's two. I wondered about that as well. I guess there's two possibilities. One is Fitbits and Apple Watches are trying to detect heart rate, and this is trying to detect blood oxygen. And it's possible that you need slightly different frequencies to tell the difference, because you're looking at the changing color of the blood. So blood is a little bit more red when it's oxygenated, and it's a little bit more blue when it's not, which is why your lips turn blue when you suffocating, you know. So it could be that, or it could just be that this particular sensor, they've played around with various things, and that's how they get it to work. So they've dropped someone from SparkFun dropped this sample code online, which has all the calculations. Actually, it's in a library in here, but the calculations are in an internal library in here, which tries to figure out how SpO2 is working in heart rate. But as I said, the SpO2 looks roughly right. The heart rate is definitely wrong. So by at least a factor of 2, and it seems to jump all over the place. It gave me a heart rate of about 260, which is, yeah, that's impressive.
Deadly.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anyone? All good? Does anyone have anything else they want to share?